This is my friend Leslie Kefer, and she's with Home Instead. And we invite Home Instead to speak every year, and we haven't had her since since the pandemic began. And we thought we'd resume these perhaps monthly Parkinson's Parkinson's support group meetings, and they're open to anyone really in our area. And we intend to highlight local resources like Home Instead. And one key reason that I invite Leslie and Home Instead to come, there's your nice face.
Hi.
One I invite Leslie and Home Instead to come is that they provide an educational presentation. It's not a sales pitch. It's not here's why Home Instead is great. I personally think that they're great, but that's not what the presentation's all about. It's very educational. And one of the topics, or a couple of the topics I've asked her to speak about, which I think are very important, are how to hire a home care agency, what sort of questions you should ask, and how to hire home care aides, because these are important questions regardless of what agency or what individuals you might work with. And another thing I always ask Leslie and Home Instead to talk about is the 70-40 talk, and she'll say what the heck that is. And I think you'll find it of interest. So overall, what Leslie's going to be talking about are Parkinson's care options. So take it away, Leslie.
Okay. And then Robin too, if you can just monitor if people ask questions, and then.
Absolutely. Okay. And I'll just interrupt as we go along.
Yeah. And then as we go, if you have a question, just type it into the chat box and I'd be happy to answer it for you.
Sounds perfect. Chat or Q&A, they'll both work.
Okay, great. I just wanted to thank Robin for having me back, and just being able to give resources and education exactly about what home care is all about. And then Corey from Emedisys, she will be speaking after me about home health. So just to start off, so you understand the difference between home care and home health. So home care will be non-medical things, and we'll go into exactly what services that we do provide. And then Corey's going to talk about more of the medical side of services, and also usually insurance will pay for home health, whereas home care tends to be either private pay or long-term insurance. So I am with Home Instead, and as I explained, we provide non-medical home care. So just today, we're going to just talk about what is home care, what are the services, how to age safely in place in your home, ways also to prevent hospitalization, and then what's the average cost of home care. And as Robin explained, what's the process? How do we hire our caregivers? And also I'll talk about pricing for some other resources in the senior living space, such as assisted living and skilled nursing. So what's a good sign when somebody needs home care? Well, if somebody's routine seems to be off, so, you know, the medical bills are piling up, they might be missing doctor's appointments. When you see them, they might not be as kept as, you know, like their hair, or they might be a little disheveled, or just their appearance is kind of off. Also driving, sometimes if they'll get lost, or they'll have signs of depression. So those are all. And then also if you go to their house, if their house maybe isn't as clean or kept up, that's another sign that help is needed, as well as losing track of medications. So Home Instead did a study pre-COVID, and it was found that 86% of seniors want to stay at home as long as possible. I'm sure that that percentage is even increased now with some of the communities where the assisted living or the skilled, when they went into lockdown mode, so you couldn't visit friends and family. And then 54% of seniors who live alone at home, they're more likely to get professional care than those seniors who might be living with either family members or friends. So what kind of services do home care agencies provide? So as I explained, it's non-medical, so it can be anything from companionship to light housekeeping, which could include doing laundry or vacuuming, cleaning up the kitchen, cleaning up the bathroom. But it's not going to include like large organizational projects. So not like reorganizing a garage or any of those things. And also a lot of times the agencies will have a percentage of the shift that can be for housekeeping. Ours is 20%, because if that's the only service that's being provided, then you would need to hire like a house cleaning service as compared to home care. Like we can help with, that can be part of the service, but it can't be the entire services that we provide. So personal care, that can include bathing and dressing, and also helping someone go to the restroom, and then also going for errands. So pre-COVID, of course, maybe going to the hairdresser or going grocery shopping, and to transportation to medical appointments. That's something we can help with. And medication reminders. So either a loved one or a friend would have to set up a pill box, and our caregivers can help remind the client to take the medication, but we can't actually physically give it to the client, and that's because we are not considered non-medical. Also, meal prep, that's a big thing. So being able to fix meals, and then also they can fix meals. Let's say they might be there during the lunchtime, and then maybe the client would like them to prepare the meal for dinner as well. So they can prepare that and put it in the fridge.
And Leslie, this brings up a question about during the time of COVID, can the aide assist with grocery shopping during COVID?
So if they are comfortable, if the caregiver is comfortable with doing that, yeah, we have still provided those services, but a lot of clients have gone to online services and delivery services that loved ones or friends have helped out with.
Of course. Thanks.
Sure. So sometimes home care, there's other resources as well. So adult day programs is one. Again, these are things that are usually pre-COVID. So an adult day care program is great. So because the people can usually go, it's usually in the daytime, and a lot of them will provide meals and like different activities. So if a loved one needs to go and run some errands or wants to go, have lunch with someone, so it gives that family or friend caregiver the break to be able to do that. And most of them will have, some have requirements like certain amount of days per week, and then there is a daily fee for that. And then home health, so that's more on the medical side, and Corey's going to explain those services, but that's when you have a nurse come in, maybe a physical therapist, an occupation therapist, or a speech therapist. And a lot of time home health will be prescribed by a doctor after somebody has either been in the hospital and just needs a little bit more care and services, or a lot of times they'll go from the hospital to the skilled nursing, and then they'll still need help or support when they get home. And then senior centers like Avenidas, where you guys usually have your support group meetings, that's also a great place to have resources and social engagement and different skills. So then now I'm going to talk about just some different resources as far as the different types of communities. So independent living senior communities usually have activities where there's social engagement, but then usually there's not meal resources. So, and also there's usually a cost that or a monthly buy-in to actually live in these type of communities. So then assisted living, that's usually where more support is given, and they will have, some of them have RNs on staff. It's where caregivers will come in and check in with the residents on a daily basis and might even escort them down to a dining room. So the meals are provided as well. And then also the social activities. And then skilled nursing is usually when, like I said, someone's been in the hospital and then needs more care or needs to get a little bit stronger before they actually go home, and also could have more medical services after they leave the hospital. And then just to give you an idea, skilled nursing these days is usually between $10,000 and $14,000 a month. But like I said, Corey will go into more details about some of those and how home health will help with those costs as well. And then respite. So pre-COVID again, let's say a caregiver needed to go on a business trip or just needed a break, or so they need someone to come in and care for a loved one. So some of the assisted living communities will offer that, where you can come in for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and usually it's a certain amount, which will include all the benefits. So the meals and the caregivers checking in on loved ones or friends, and then also being able to have the RN services if that's something that the community offers. And then home care, we can do that too. So if you just want to do it for a temporary, a short amount of time, we can help you with that as well. And then hospice care. So that's another type of service that usually if someone is chronically ill or just needs some more support, then that would be the hospice care.
Leslie, we had a question in the chat, which is, does long-term care insurance work for any of these services?
Yes. So long-term care insurance helps with home care. And then also it can help with skilled nursing as well.
And I would think long-term care insurance could help with assisted living too.
Oh yeah, that's correct.
Yep.
That's correct. Yes. Yes. And then, so different ways to age safely at home. So one thing that we do when we have a client consult is we do a home safety checklist. So we go through the home and we'll make sure all the appliances are working. You know, the front door, there's a lock, the doorbell's working, that there aren't any rugs that are tripping hazards. And then also if someone needs more support in the shower, it might be, you know, installing grab bars, or if going to the restroom, have raised toilet seats. So we do that just so to make sure everything's in working order, and just give some suggestions too. And another thing we do is we suggest that there's a flashlight by the bed. So in case there's emergency, then, you know, you'd be able to find your way. And also having things like emergency contact numbers on the refrigerator. So if there's an accident emergency, then the caregivers actually can know exactly who to contact, as well as a pulse, which are like your life sustaining wishes. So DNRs, and things like that. And then what's the benefits of having home care? Well, things include healthy lifestyle. So a lot of times someone who needs home care might be missing meals or not drinking enough. Dehydration is huge, or having nutritious meals. So, they're opening a can of soup or frozen meals, things like that. Or medication reminders. They're not taking their meds on time or the right amount. So, and also social interaction. So, again, pre-COVID, taking people out for exercise, or maybe there's an exhibit or a movie that they want to see. So being able to engage and have, because social interaction is extremely important. And then reduces stress for family caregivers or friends as well. It's very overwhelming being a caregiver, and a lot of times people get burnt out and they need a break. And then home safety are some of the items that I already discussed when we would do the home safety checklist. And then community involvement too, being able to go to events, to be involved with the community. And then, so let's talk about how to prevent hospitalization. Again, home care is important because following doctor's orders, as I explained before, a lot of people, if they need extra support, they might get mixed up as far as, did they take their medication today, or how many pills are they supposed to take, or they're just forgetting. So, or following doctor's orders as far as, getting out and doing exercise or things like that. And then you can't ignore symptoms. So if a caregiver's with you and you're kind of feeling off, if you were by yourself, you might just think, oh, I'll feel better tomorrow. But whereas the caregiver could say, let's call the doctor, or let's make an appointment, let's figure that out. And then reduce risks of falling. So a lot of people who have fallen once will have repeat falls, and making sure, like I said, there's no tripping hazard. So there's not carpets or things that are gonna induce falls. And we talked a little bit too about staying active physically and mentally is important. And again, maintaining a healthy diet. So having fresh food, having a variety, making sure, you're eating properly, which is going to help you stay healthy as well.
Leslie, could you say a little bit more about what a home care agency or a home care aide can do in terms of helping people stay active physically and mentally? That sounds like it would be a very important task.
Sure. So staying active physically, like taking walks, making sure that they're involved with activities that they like to do. Maybe it would be a jigsaw puzzle, or could be adult coloring, something that besides just watching TV, or, doing things that are going to stimulate your brain. Maybe it's a crossword puzzle or Sudoku, if the person, is able mentally to do those kinds of things. Does that cover it, Robin, or is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's good. And I'm also wondering, in terms of staying active physically, would a home care aide potentially exercise or take somebody for a walk or that sort of thing?
Yeah, those are all things that they can do. And also, if they have a physical therapist, they can encourage them to do the exercises, and also like standby, what we call is standby assist or standby supervision. So if somebody is trying to improve their balance or their stamina, then that's something that the caregiver can do as well.
And I'm curious, with Parkinson's disease, as you know, falls are a great risk.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent do the home care aides know about things like gait belts and other sort of assistive devices?
Yeah, so all of our caregivers, when they're hired, they go through 2 full days, so 8 hours of training. And some of that includes the hands-on training. So learning how to do those transfers and using the gait belt. So they have the knowledge about that.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure. So a lot of times people don't really know the difference between a private caregiver and hiring an agency. And a lot of times private caregivers, their hourly rate will be lower than hiring an agency. And the difference in that is because if you hire a private caregiver, then you're essentially their employer. So you will need to file taxes. You will need to carry some sort of liability insurance. So if there was an accident in the home, then you would be responsible for medical bills. And then also if you have a private caregiver and not an agency, if the person is sick or has a family emergency, then you'll kind of be stuck. Whereas if you hired an agency, a replacement could be sent. And then also when you hire an agency, all the employees or all the caregivers are employees of that agency. So we cover all the benefits. So we do all the taxes, provide, sick leave, vacation, all of that kind of services. And also they are bonded and go through extensive background checks. And we also carry the liability insurance. So if there was an accident, then we would take care of those costs. Is there any questions regarding that? Because that's a very important subject.
One question we've had in the past is, how do you know if what you think is an agency is actually a full service agency versus a referral agency? Is there any way to tell what sort of agency you're talking to? Because I think people might not know what the difference is.
Yeah, so a referral agency, basically, they will be able to provide caregivers, like they're kind of like what I would compare a temp agency to. So if you need someone, you contact the temp agency, they find the candidate, and then they're the point to put you guys together. So that's kind of the same as what a referral agency does. But then again, they're not going to take care of all the legal aspects and the all the liability and things like that.
So is there some kind of a question that we as lay people can ask an agency to find out if they're full service or a referral agency?
So that would be an excellent question to ask them. Are you a full service agency or are you just a referral agency? Are the caregivers actually your employees, or are you just putting people together?
Okay. I wonder if one question would be, I liked what you said about, are the caregivers your employees?
Mm-hmm.
Caregiver is your employee, then the agency would have to be providing a 1099, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so if it's a referral agency, they would not be providing a 1099.
Correct.
Okay,
More like a contractor. Yeah.
right. Okay, so
Exactly. Yeah.
that might be a good question to help distinguish if you're unsure what sort of agency you're working with.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Thank
good.
you for that. Excellent
Yeah.
information.
Yeah. Well, you gave me the tip of asking whether somebody was an employee or not, and that would be a good way to know for sure if they're an employees, if they're getting a 1099.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Definitely.
we have a couple of questions. Let's see. Should you use a full service agency in order to have your long-term care insurance pay for care?
Yeah. A lot of times, actually, with Home Instead, we will be able to provide the information to the long-term insurance company. So as far as, because they need documentation about what's being done, because there's usually certain what are called ADLs, activities of daily living, that need, a lot of times there's like 2 out of 6 for different categories that need to actually be happening before a claim can be started. So we provide that information and to them. So it's great because we can be the liaison and help you with that process.
And just to add to that, you see on Leslie's slide, the private hire column, it indicates that so many things are the client responsibility. And we did have a woman named Roberta who was part of our caregiver support group for a very long time. And so her husband passed away, and he had Lewy body dementia. And she hired aides privately. And it was quite an ordeal to do all of the paper. She had to hire an accountant to do all of the 1099s and all the payroll tax and all of that stuff. And she was able to work with the long-term care insurance, but again, it was just a huge hassle for paperwork and not really something that a stressed out caregiver would want to do. So
Yeah.
it is possible to have long-term care insurance and have private hire, but the hassle, you definitely have to go in eyes wide open with the hassle factor.
It sounds very complicated, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a question that doesn't necessarily pertain to this slide, Leslie, but
Sure.
the question is about do home care aides, like the ones that work at home instead or elsewhere, do home care aides work with people who have Parkinson's and dementia? Could you talk a little bit about perhaps the training that's provided and
Sure.
maybe special things that have to be kept in mind?
Sure. So we do work with clients who have Parkinson's, and we do have caregivers that have experience in those areas. So something that I'll talk about next is what happens is if you want to hire a home care agency, you would set up what's called a client consult. So you would go into exactly details of what services you would need. And if, any medical conditions too, like Parkinson's, dementia, heart, things like that, those are all things that would be determined or talked about in the client consult. And then also our caregivers, we have specialized training in certain subjects. So we do have specialized trainings that we do for Alzheimer's and as well a Parkinson's. So we have live trainings as well as online trainings too.
And we have another question that came in through the Q&A, and that is, do you have trouble finding suitable employees?
Our hiring process is pretty rigorous. So when someone is submitting an application, our recruiter will go into a lot of details, and also they have to provide 3 personal references and 3 professional references. So, and then they are fingerprinted, background checked, all of those. And like I explained, they'll go through those 2 full days of training. And then each quarter, we also have the specialized training, or we'll pick a different topic. So they're always receiving ongoing training.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So when I was talking about the client consult, so we can either come to your house, or if you prefer to do it virtual these days because of COVID, we can do that as well. So the client consult would be conducted by a client services manager, and there's no fee for that. It's complimentary. And at that meeting, like I said, we'd kind of go more into detail about the services that you would need, the personality of the client, and then also the schedule that you want, because we will then work with our staffing team to meet all those requirements. And then we would develop what's called a care plan. So in the care plan, it would outline exactly what services would be performed, how often, like through the shift and things like that. And then we also have what are called quality assurance visits every 90 days. So we would meet with the client as well as the primary caregiver to just kind of talk about if the appropriate care is being reached. So sometimes if somebody comes home from the hospital or a skilled nursing, there are things that would need to be changed in the care plan as they gain strength or get better. And also the other way, let's say somebody's going to cognitively decline or physically decline, then we'd make those changes ongoing, because our caregivers always would notify us if there was any change in the care. But those are things that are updated all the time.
And would the, maybe you haven't gotten to this yet, but would the possible caregivers that the staff has identified, would those caregivers potentially be interviewed either in person or via Zoom or something?
So what we do is, we're pretty confident that after we have these meetings that we will be able to make an appropriate match. And if for any reason, if the match doesn't work out, then we would find a replacement. So our policy is you can meet, you can schedule an interview with the caregiver virtually, and Home Instead will pay for the first interview, but anything after that, then the client would need to pay for that.
Okay, the first interview with one individual caregiver.
Right.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
Yeah.
And what do you, perhaps this is coming, but if you could also address what aides are doing in terms of COVID safety.
Yeah. So I have a slide that I was going
Great.
to show at the end, but
Let's wait for that. We can wait
Okay.
for that. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Leslie.
Okay. So these are great questions if you are hiring an agency, and also it's good to call, a couple different agencies. So some things that we've already talked about, Like, do you do background checks? How do you select your caregivers? Are they bonded? Are they employees? What type of training do you provide? Is there a charge for the assessment? And also, a good question to ask, is there a weekly minimum? Most home care agencies will have at least 12 hours a week minimum, and most are at least 4-hour shifts. So you would do 3 days at 4 hours to meet that minimum 12-hour weekly, if that makes sense. Because a lot of times people think there are some agencies out there that don't have the minimums, but most of them do. So when you're talking to an agency, it's a good idea to have some type of schedule in mind that when you think you'll need the help. And for us, we don't charge more for on the weekends or in the evenings. So, and then it also is good to know anytime a caregiver works over 8 hours, it's considered overtime, which would be time and a half. So let's say somebody would need 24-hour care, like 7 days a week. We can do that as well. But what we would do is we would find 3 caregivers to work each the 8 hours. So then there wouldn't be the overtime.
And again, one more time, Leslie, you said that the minimum for home instead, and again, we're just talking about home instead in this
Right.
particular case. The minimum for home instead is 3 days a week for 4 hours a day, or the minimum is 12 hours. So could you do 2 days a week for 6 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So the minimum is 12 hours, however it spreads out.
Right. And then too, just to let you know, when you would sign a service agreement, it's not like you're signing a year contract. So basically, if the schedule needs to change, so let's say the day of the week or the time period, you're not locked into what you talk about when you first sign on. So, and also if you need to add care, we can do that as well. So I don't want people to think that once you sign that service agreement, that's the schedule that you're locked into.
Okay, and I seem to remember in the old days
Yeah.
that there was like a sort of a get me ready to get going in the morning, quote unquote package. And then there was a get me ready to go to bed sort of package. Is that, like, please come help me for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, sort of a thing? Does that still exist, or no?
We don't do a
By the
split shift
wayside.
like that.
Okay, all right. It's probably gone by the wayside.
Yeah, and a lot of times why there are the minimums, it's because in order for a caregiver, financially and time efficiency, that's why we require that 4 hours
Yeah,
minimum.
understand.
So
Yeah, understand. What about, can you say what home instead charges per hour?
sure, I think, is that in my next? That's a
Oh,
great
good.
transition.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Robin. So most full service agencies are between, what we're finding now is 35 to 38, and that's what home instead, that's currently our rate. Sometimes in different areas it could be a little bit less or a little bit more. So, and the range is determined, usually people who need more hands-on care or are advanced dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that, that'll probably be at that 37 or 38 per hour. as compared to if somebody just needs, you know, help with, let's say, meal prep or housekeeping, maybe some companionship, then that would tend to be on the less expensive side. And what happens is when you have that client consult, the care manager will determine what your rate will be.
And could there be a combination? So say you want somebody 3 days a week for that 4-hour minimum, and one day you'd like somebody to do walking or exercise, or maybe even help with speech therapy, but the other days you might not want that sort of level of care, and it would be fine just to have somebody do meal prep and what have you. So then in that case, there might be two different aides with a different charge, associated hourly charge.
Usually we just determine one rate. We don't have like different
Okay.
rates for different.
Okay, I got it. All right.
Yeah. And then to let you know, we bring what's called a client binder to the residents, and in the binder, it has the individual care plan. So, and an assessment as well, so that the caregiver will know exactly, you know, what services are required throughout the shift. And also we have a section that are log notes. So the caregiver will record during each shift what has happened. So that way loved ones or friends are always able to see that and are aware of what's being done. And why we do that, another reason that we have that too, is because let's say your regular caregiver gets ill or has an emergency and we have to send a replacement, they're always given the information prior to starting the shift. But then again, it's there at the residence, so it's known what exactly is needed for that client.
And is there always an effort made, or generally an effort made, to have the same caregiver show up if it's different days of the week? Is that the priority?
Yes, definitely. And a lot of times though, sometimes even if with the 12-hour minimum, weekly minimum, we'll have 2 caregivers. And that's because it's beneficial, because that way there's 2 people that are going to be familiar with your needs. And so if someone gets sick, has an emergency, then there's somebody else who's familiar with the requirements. And then and availability too. So the caregivers that we have right now, we have 85 caregivers on our roster, but they all have different availabilities. Some, you know, are working part-time, some are working full-time, some prefer evening or overnight or daytime. So we have just a varied schedules for the caregivers.
Okay, and we have a couple of questions have come in about copies of Leslie's slides, and in particular, that very good list from the previous slide of the process of hiring an agency and those good questions to ask.
Sure.
And Leslie's said we can share the PDF of her, we'll convert it to PowerPoint to PDF, and we'll figure out some place to post that. And we'll probably just email everybody that was that we invited to this webinar, and we'll email a link to that. And then we'll also just go ahead and type up those list of good questions to ask an agency, because they're great questions. So we'll send that to everybody.
And I'm pretty sure I have a PDF of those questions, so I could just send you that document.
Perfect.
Robin, and
That sounds perfect. Thanks, Leslie.
So yeah. And then also at the end, there'll be my contact information, so people can always contact me if they need anything.
Sounds good.
So we had talked a little bit about this, what's our interviewing and screening process. So we do the criminal, national background checks, DMV, sex offender, we fingerprint, we do a drug test, we do a TB test, and everyone is bonded and insured. And then we talked about the different trainings that we have on different topics, and that the caregivers are actually employees of Home Instead. And then here's just some information about our franchise. We were founded in 1997. We have over 1,000 clients, and currently we have 9 staff members. Community outreach, Michelle Rogers, who is the franchise owner, she's served on a lot of different boards for either nonprofits or community agencies. And there is it's called Community Services Agency that we actually donate our caregiving hours to that agency. So, and Michelle's also highly involved on a federal as well as a state level. She's always up to date or participating, talking, to senators or policymakers and things like that. So she's highly involved. We also do something at the holiday time, and it's called Be a Santa to a Senior, where we give, usually it's over 500 gifts to seniors in need. So we work with local skilled nursing and senior centers, and also CSA, the community services agencies. So it's a great way to give back to the community. And then we're known as a trusted, local, committed resource. And like I said, that we're highly involved in the community, and we provide non-medical care for seniors. And we are nationwide. So, but each franchise is individually owned and has a certain territory. So the office I work out of, our physical office, is in Sunnyvale, and our territory is Sunnyvale all the way up to Belmont. But if for any reason, if you would call an office and it wouldn't be in the territory, we work together and we could transfer you and get you to the right person. And then, like I said, here's my contact information. So if you have any further questions, let me know. And there's a few other things I'm going to go over, but does anybody have any other questions right now?
I don't see anything right now, so
Okay.
keep it going.
So let me go, let's see. I'm going to close the PowerPoint. Oh. Let's share my screen. So when Robin, earlier you were talking about what are we doing for COVID? So we are providing PPE to our caregivers. So that includes masks, gloves, sanitizers. Also, we can provide services in the assisted living. So sometimes they're requiring gowns or face shields. We would just do companionship or helping with preventing fall risks, but we don't do personal care at the assisted living because they have their own caregivers that do that. But here's just like a snapshot that shows what our conference room looks like now. Hope everybody can see that.
Yeah.
So it's pretty impressive. And then 2, 90% of our staff has currently been vaccinated.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then also we have at our office a partnership with a testing site, so we can do on-site testing at our office, and then we send out the tests, and then we get the results too. So, and that's something that we've been able to go and test clients too for
So
COVID.
do you always test clients, or do you always test your aides, or what?
So we highly encourage our caregivers to be tested and get vaccinated, but at this point in time, we can't mandate it.
And what do you have the testing for? Is it testing for AIDS?
Yeah. So if, let's say, somebody's, not feeling well or coming down with symptoms, and so yeah, they
I
can
see. Great.
come to our office to get the test done.
And we have a question about what is the turnover rate and the average length of engagement?
For our caregivers, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think the turnover rate is for your caregivers,
Okay.
and maybe the average length of engagement is per client.
Okay. So our turnover rate, we're actually, we're pretty lucky in that respect. I think our turnover rate is maybe, I want to say like 30 or maybe 35%, which in this industry, that's pretty low. And as far as we have caregivers that are coming on all the time, and that's just because too, like, a lot of times a caregiver it could be a second career for someone, that they have cared for a loved one or a friend, and they find that they enjoy it and they want to help other people, or they're retired and they're looking for something to do after retirement. So there's all kinds of different, and some are going to school, to like nursing school or CNA or some sort of medical school. So a lot of times they will caregive when they're going through the school process. And then, once they complete, then they move on to other things. So there's just a whole different variety of caregivers and their experiences, or what leads them to this profession. And also we've had I think our longest caregiver has been on staff for 16 years. So
Wow, long
there's
time.
some that have been with us for a really long time.
And how about for clients? Do you have an average amount of time that clients stay as your clients?
It kind of all depends, because sometimes we'll come in and help clients that are on hospice. So, that could be a shorter time period, or we've had clients who are independent, and then, they can stay with us for 10 plus years. So then we're just helping them through that process. So it all kind of depends.
Okay, very good. And this is not a question, but one of our group members with Parkinson's disease, we recommended Home Instead to her a few months ago. And she says, I'm very happy with their service 12 hours a week and with my caregiver. Thank you for the recommendations.
Oh, great.
This is one happy Parkinson's client.
Love to hear that.
Yeah, very sweet. Okay, and are you going to do 24/7 or 40/70 rather? Okay.
Yep.
And then we'll move on to Corey.
Where is that? Okay. Are you seeing that or no?
No.
Okay, let me. Oh, there it is. How about now?
Yep, seeing it now.
Okay. So this is something too that Robin, you can distribute. So basically this is an action plan for successful aging. And Home Instead has put together this document. It's really about how to start having those conversations with family about what are your wishes, as far as it can be financial, health, having a plan, like, do you want to stay at home? What do you want? Would you prefer a family member? When a family member maybe can't provide that care, then having in-home care, or then also looking at assisted living and things like that. So I'm not going to go through the whole guide, but what's great, and just to do the 40-70 rule or the 70-40 rule, it's basically if someone is approaching the age of 40, then there's a good chance that a loved one is probably at the age of 70. And that's a good time to start having these conversations about your wishes so that everybody's on board, instead of waiting so long when maybe a loved one wouldn't have the ability to express what they want, as well as like having legal documents in place too. So power of attorney. So if somebody isn't capable of making decisions, that, you know, it's been laid out what their wishes are and who are the people to take care of those things. So for each of the subjects that were here in the content, so the financial, health, relationships, driving, end of life, it's something that we have determined as ACT. So the A in ACT is assess, the C is consider, and the T is talk. So what this guide does, it goes through each of the topics, and with those categories, assess, consider, and talk. And also what's great is it has at each section conversation tips. So how to start talking about these topics.
And I asked Leslie to bring up this resource, and we will share it as well. Because I've used it with my in-laws. I think it's a great conversational guide to have with older people, and similarly the people who are in their 70s, or in the case of my in-laws in their 90s, they can have questions to know or information that they know to share with us, the
Right.
generation.
Mm-hmm.
Going backwards just a little bit, Leslie,
Sure.
I got a question about what are home care aides who work for Home Instead not allowed to do?
So there, you mean medically? Is that what the person?
Yes, I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
So one thing would be, okay, so taking blood pressure. So if they have the automated cuff, that's something the caregiver would be able to do and like report the number. But if it was a manual cuff, they couldn't do that. If someone has a catheter, we can help with emptying the bag, but we can't remove it or do anything else. That would be someone who falls under the home health category that Corey's going to talk about.
And how about a condom catheter? You guys could remove that, I assume?
Usually we can't remove any catheters.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And then we can't do any injections. We can't do any wound care. We can't even like put Neosporin on a wound because that's considered out of our scope.
And I think you cannot fill pill containers, is that right?
Right. We talked about that at the beginning of the
Right.
presentation. We can actually, if there's a pill box that has been created by a loved one or a friend, we can remind them to take the medications, but we can't physically give them the medication.
Okay, and can you open up the, say it's Monday noon pills, can you open those up and, dump them in the hand, or is that not permissible?
Not permissible.
Not permissible. Okay, all right. It's all good to know.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
And then if you, have specific questions, you can always ask during your client consult.
Of course. We have a few more questions, but I think we should move on to Corey. And if we have a chance, Leslie, will you stay around and?
Sure, I'd be happy
Yes.
to.
Okay, sounds good.